Hi, this is Jack Olmstead, GMO Free News. I'm here right now with Nayyirah Shariff, very special guest. She's an organizer in Flint, Michigan. Oh, wait. See, I started this and I didn't have the camera on myself. So here I am. You can see my lips move. Nayyirah Shariff is right here.
I'm a contractual worker, so I would have organizations contract me for various stuff. Most of the time, my specialty is field organizing and field campaigns. And so I do that for a while, and then I go off and do something else for a while. And that's kind of how it goes.
So what were you doing before the Flint water crisis?
So I one of the founders of the Flint Democracy Defense League, and so we were a group that was really formed to organize against Flint's emergency manager. So in 2011, Michigan passed the emergency manager law, and we, as residents of Michigan, decided that we wanted to repeal that law. And so there was a group that was the official campaign called Stand Up for Democracy. And we were going, trucking along, collecting petitions. And in November 2011, the state of Michigan announced that Flint was going to receive an emergency manager. And we decided that we needed to form a specific group to confront Flint's emergency manager. And that's how the Democracy Defense League was born.
So your roots are really in the emergency management law.
Yes.
That's part of your DNA right now. So are you how do you feel knowing that you were so right and the bureaucracy that you fought against were so incredibly wrong?
Well, when you look at the other cities, you could really see like the emergency. I call it the emergency manager playbook. Is they're not that smart, so they're kind of doing the same things in all of the cities that were under an emergency manager. So, like far as Flint, like this is, I would say, like this would have the most long-term consequences and the most heinous of all of the actions of all of the emergency managers combined in Michigan.
So to be an emergency manager, you don't have to be that smart. You just have to go by the playbook.
I would say so.
So what is the playbook? Is it published online?
No, there's not a. I just refer. I'm a joker, so I just refer to it as a playbook.
Oh,
So,
before you get into that, you're a joker. Do you have any Flint water jokes? Because I'm kind of collecting them. Have you heard any?
um, now I have a brain fart. So no, I don't have any. I don't have any jokes necessarily with that. I always joke with Melissa Mays that she's gonna turn into Wolverine like the X-Men. And so this is really a government experiment to turn us into superheroes.
Well, she is a superhero. She blasted off this morning, and she's in New York City.
Yeah.
And one superpower she does not have is to charge her cell phone.
Yeah.
I guess she's going to have to wish for that one next time.
Yeah.
I guess next time she gets under the poisoned water in Flint, right?
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, lead is not a conductor, so she can't use her body to charge the phone.
But there's copper and there's tin and there's magnesium.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of heavy metals that come out of her shower head.
Yeah, the copper, she'll be good. She needs more copper in her body.
Well, she's got a copper. She's got a copper bathtub.
Yeah.
So maybe that's it. And lead, it's what everybody talks about, but there are other heavy metals coming through the pipes of Flint to the people, like tin.
Yeah.
Nobody's talking about tin.
Yeah, and I think that that is mostly because no one's testing for it.
Well, nobody's testing for glyphosate either, which is the runoff of the herbicides that they're spraying the surrounding sugar beet farms of the area either. And hopefully next month something like that will happen. But anyway, that's my soapbox, and we're here to talk about uh, you and the emergency managers not being very smart and their playbook. Can you give us a couple of plays from the emergency manager playbook?
Well, for instance, in Benton Harbor, which we don't really talk a lot about. So when the emergency manager law was adopted, there were three emergency financial managers, which was what we had previously. They were grandfathered in, and so that was in Detroit public schools. Well, now you're starting to see some national attention of the conditions of the Detroit public schools, and then the city of Pontiac and the city of Benton Harbor. So in the city of Benton Harbor, there was a development company, the Harbor Beach, the Harbor Shores Development Company. They wanted to purchase lakefront property in Lake Michigan, which is a huge natural body of water. Um, the city of Benton Harbor, which is extremely poor and majority African American. It is the world headquarters of Whirlpool. And so Harbor Beach wanted to purchase lakefront property, which was a public park for the city of Benton Harbor. It was Jean Clark Park. There was back in the 1920s, it was a rich family who owned that property. Their child died, was drowned in Lake Michigan, and they ended up giving that property to the city of Benton Harbor for the public good. And so they wanted to buy that property to turn it into a golf course. So they tried to go through the city council, their city council. The city council was like, no, we're not doing that. We're not buying it. But one of the first things that once the emergency financial manager was given all of these powers under the emergency manager law, they leased it for, I can't remember how many years now, but now it is part of the senior PGA golf tour, and the average income in Benton Harbor is about $8,000 a year to be part of this country club that now has this golf course. It's $5,000 a year. So the majority of that park is taken away to be leased under the emergency manager law. And under the emergency manager law, they can't, well, under the state of Michigan, you cannot sell public parkland, well, public assets, well, public parkland, like without the vote of the people. And how they're kind of getting around some of these things is they're leasing the lands, the public commons, to private developers and private corporations.
So you don't have to be that smart to be an emergency manager, but your team, you got a pretty smart team, and that team is lawyers and political analysts and PR folks. So so they've written the laws, these politicians, they've written the laws, so they know the loopholes.
Yeah.
So I think a emergency manager, his term or her term is like 2 years, but
no. So under the emergency manager law, like to be an emergency manager, you just got to take a 3-day class. So
a 3-day class?
Yeah, 3-day class.
How much does the class cost? Is it free?
I think it's invite only.
Invite only.
The powers of a dictator.
So, who teaches the class, and what's the syllabus? Have you seen the syllabus for the class?
I actually have. I actually have a copy of the curriculum that they had, and it was through MSU. There is a professor. I can't remember which department. His name is Eric Scarsoni. and he was one of the, assisted to write the law and is kind of on retainer for the state of Michigan to assist the emergency managers. He actually came to Flint when they were thinking about changing the form of government. So he did that, and he's been around in some of the other communities, popping up as a technical assistant to the emergency manager.
Sounds like he's a rich guy. He's like double dipping. He has professor salary. He's on retainer with the state. He runs around and to these communities. I'm sure it's not on his own dime. I'm sure the meter is running because these emergency managers. I mean, I hear they bank some pretty big bucks. $1,000 an hour or something like that.
Yeah. And right now, under the previous emergency manager law, Public Act 4, the cities that they came in to oversee had to foot the bill of the emergency managers and their staff. But under the replacement law, PA 46, the state pays for the salaries of the emergency managers.
No, and I guess the emergency manager can do basically anything they want except one thing. They can't do one thing, and that is miss a bond payment.
Yeah, and they can't reduce the pensions. Those are really kind of like two things, and that's only because in Michigan, our pensions are protected by our state constitution. So in Detroit, to reduce the pensions, they have to go to bankruptcy court to actually make that happen.
Can't they do something with health insurance?
Yeah. So the emergency managers, they have the power to change union contracts. So health insurance is part of the negotiation contracts with unions, and our emergency managers have done that in Flint and other places around the state. They have the power to sell off public assets. They replace two branches of your local government, so your legislative and executive branch. That's automatically in the law, and it's at the emergency manager's discretion if those elected officials are going to have a salary and what their duties are. So in Pontiac, the emergency manager, when he went down there, the emergency manager down there zeroed out their salary, and they never received the salary, and they never met. So in Flint, they got a little bit slick with it. So
what do you mean they zeroed out the salary?
Well, automatically in the law, the salaries are zeroed out because they're replacing their powers. So the emergency manager has at the emergency manager's discretion, they can either give them back full salary or reduce salary.
Who are you talking about? Who are these people?
So in Flint's emergency manager, we've had now 4 different emergency managers at various times. So I'll just speak to Flint because that's what I'm most familiar with, and I can speak most to. So when we first had an emergency manager, it was December in 2011, and that emergency manager was Michael Brown. He signed an executive order that with the duties of the city council and what their salary was. So in the city of Flint, our city council is part-time. It's classified as part-time, so that salary is about $24,000 a year plus benefits. And the emergency manager reduced their salary to about $7,000 a year. And
didn't they also reduce the mayor's salary?
Yes, he did, through another executive order. So those are, and then along with that reduction of salary, they had a job description for our elected officials. They were things that they could and could not do. So a lot of their powers were stripped.
The mayor, as I remember, was making $90,000, and then emergency manager comes in and goes, "I think you're worth like $50,000."
Yeah.
Something like that. Though the emergency manager,
Was
he's
making
like taking in $250,000 a year.
Yeah. Well, what Darnell early, I think he was the highest paid, but Michael Brown, it was about 200,000, about 170 something.
Well, he also gets benefits, right?
Yeah, plus all the benefits and all of that stuff. So it was a mess.
It sounds like rape and pillage of the community, of the poor community. Let's sell off assets. Let's grab as much money as we can to pay off our bonds, the Wall Street guys.
Yeah.
And good luck in the future.
Yeah, exactly. And then also the other part of the playbook is to privatize services. So like what's a more stable market than a municipal service? So in the city of Flint, not only did our emergency manager put an assessment on our property taxes for sanitation, he sold off the department, including the garbage trucks, to a private company. And so all of those workers who worked there, they were gone. They weren't moved on to other departments. They were gone. So the emergency manager has the power to set aside your charter, which is your local constitution, and just like it's at his behest, his or her behest, on what's followed and what's not followed.
So what kind of a person is an emergency manager? What's their genome? What's their makeup? Do they have a heart? I mean, to become an emergency manager, I guess you have to work for the military or some organization where feelings don't matter, people's lives don't matter. You go in there with a hatchet, not a scalpel, and you just hack like tree cutter. Is that would be a good analogy of a job description of past employment for an emergency manager?
Well, so our situation is slightly different than some of the other communities that received emergency managers. Our first emergency manager actually grew up in Flint. He worked at some of the area nonprofits. He worked at the United Way in Genesee County, which is like a agency and organization that helps the community.
So he had friends.
He
had roots in Flint.
Yeah. So he didn't come in like some of the other emergency managers. A lot of the other emergency managers came in from outside the community to just start wrecking up stuff. But our emergency manager here like grew up in Flint. And that was one of the, I would say, like narrative conflicts, because when we would go around and just talk about how undemocratic this law was, people's response, especially people who may have personally worked with him or knew him, was like, well, he's not going to be like that because we know him. Like, we have a history with him. And we would always tell them to read the law because the law gives him those powers. He doesn't have to worry about any sort of political fallout, or if he didn't meet with a certain constituency that there was going to be resistance, because the law says he doesn't have to. He doesn't have to make sure that a neighborhood is okay if he decides to sell off a park. And he actually did, it wasn't necessary to sell off, but lease a quarter of a park for a parking lot. So he took a park where kids played in and turned a lot of it into a parking lot.
I guess he listened to too much Joni Mitchell, huh? He took the song, turned paradise into a parking lot, and he achieved his dream.
Yes, and so even as we talk about the water crisis, we cannot divorce this from the emergency manager law, because it was the actions of the various emergency managers that created the culture of this situation.
I wanted to get more personal with you. What's the day in the life of you right now?
Well, right now, just being very grateful for all the international support, like either through giving water or just joining us and standing in solidarity with our outrage. So we're very happy that our new mayor, Mayor Kieran Weaver, is able to fight for us and fight with us, because for I would say up until November, the grassroots and the community was um, in opposition of our mayor and our executive leadership. So now we are in unison, and we see a lot of movement happening fairly quickly, because I was against the switch to the Flint River, just like even before we even had like all of these other like health issues, like with the E. coli outbreak and then the TTHM notification, because ideologically that decision did not occur from our elected officials and from with the consent of our community. That was a unilateral decision made by our emergency manager. So but a day in a life for me right now, fielding all of this, like a lot of the outside interests. So there's a lot of media who's contacting us. And so usually I don't like being on camera.
Yeah, I haven't seen you around. I haven't seen pictures of you. I haven't seen any interviews of you.
Yeah, I don't like being on camera, but usually what I prefer doing is like people who want to be on camera is just coordinating some of that stuff. So usually if someone usually I do the stuff nobody else wants to do.
Well, like what? What do people don't want to do?
Or if they specifically ask for me. So a couple of weeks ago I was on Democracy Now! And
oh yeah, I remember you on Democracy Now!
Yeah,
You typically told you have a famous you can take his apology and flush it down the toilet.
Yeah, yeah, I said that because I do that, and I do a lot of behind the scenes stuff. So a lot of the writing and like the logistics, the strategy stuff. So that's why I feel more comfortable in, because as an organizer, you're more comfortable with like a lot of the behind the scenes stuff.